Go to your ankle circle, if you don't mind, please. Precedent, precedent, precedent. So remember how the elbow and radial ulna joint, two totally different joints, but they lived in the same circle because they lived in the same capsule. And you had muscles that crossed both, that influenced both. So we got a similar thing happening here, okay? Actually, if you, let's say you're looking at the top of your foot, and you see 4, 5, yay, I actually got the right number of digits. This area is somewhat circular. And you can take your hands and wrap it around. And you say, well, what lives in this area? So basically all we're doing in our circles, we're just chopping off the other parts that don't really matter. And you say, well, based on 310, I learned that bilateral axis represents our true ankle joint. You remember that? The talocrural joint where the talus rotates about the tibia and the fibula. And again, you look at that thing and you're like, well, I can see how the talus would want to do this, but good Lord, I don't want the talus to do that. That doesn't seem like a good day. And I kind of don't want the talus to do this in there, because that would blow out. That's what high ankle springs are. It's when you torque the foot and the talus rotates in its transverse plane and literally pulls apart the fibula from the tibia. It's a bad day, right? But that's what's happening. You land on the outside of your foot, and your foot actually rotates in the transverse plane, and the talus does this. Okay? This is what the talus does under normal circumstances. We want the talus to work in normal circumstances. We don't want the talus to do this kind of crazy stuff, and we don't want the talus to do that kind of crazy stuff. So we have areas that do allow some motion in mostly the frontal plane. It's a combination of all. But let me give you the reason we have, there's a lot of reasons, but for us, being able to give a little and glide a little, man, when we are balancing, and I'm not talking about just sport stand, but when we're unilateral support, we kind of have to have a little sway there in the frontal plane, right? And so that's where you get what's underneath the talus, the calcaneus and the cuneiforms and the fibular and the cuboid and the metatarsal. That's what can kind of do this stuff. Ankle joint just gives you forward back stuff. And the subtalar underneath the talus and transverse, all the other bones that go across, that's what's kind of helping you on the side to side. Okay? When you balance on one foot, whether you want to do it like for a test, or whether you're walking unilaterally, it kind of functions like a teeter-totter, if you think about it. You know, like a teeter-totter, right, where you get one person on one side, another person on the other side. So basically what you have is you have this average axis going in between your first and second toes. So basically you're between your big toe and your second toe. Well, which piggies is that? That little piggy. So the market piggy and the second piggy. So there's your teeter-totter in between your big toe and your second toe. And you have muscles on the inside and muscles on the outside that are constantly balancing your teeter-totter to keep you from falling over. And when we get into levers, I'm going to teach you guys that some of the functions of levers are a lot more than just the elbow is the ankle is the levers are what you need from them. And if you need balance, you're going to call upon a certain leverage type, muscles on the inside, working with muscles on the outside to kind of keep it from going. That's why you're constantly swaying. If you ever, kind of notice, you can't really keep your center mass over your base support. You're constantly swaying. Why? Because you're constantly adjusting the teeter-totter. If you're trying to think about keeping the bubble level. Or think of it like this, when you're driving, even though your car's going straight, you're constantly moving your hands. Like you're constantly adjusting. You want to sway this way, you bring the car that way. It's called undulating constancy. You guys might have heard that in physiology, where you talk about like maintaining blood pressure, or maintaining insulin levels, where your body is constantly readjusting for overshoots and undershoots. Okay? So the ankle joint is going to be about our bilateral axis. So if you look at your circle, ankle, right? So that bilateral axis represents the ankle joint. So because we have this bilateral axis, we're looking in terms of muscles that cross it, that function at it, muscles that are anterior or posterior to it. And the anterior crossing muscles, the muscles that cross in the front, dude, how easy is this? If you cross your ankle in the front and you pull, you remember in elementary school there was always that like one kid that would go to this part of your shoestring and just pull it out, right? Yeah. Were you that kid? I'm joking, Colin. I was like, I was that kid. You know what I'm talking about? Like the kid that learns that trick from their big brother or something and they go to your string. So if you think about it though, if you pull anterior, wouldn't you be pulling in a direction of dorsiflexion? You'd be a dorsiflexor. And if you crossed in the back, you'd be a plantar flexor. That's it for the ankle. Anterior, posterior. You cross in the front, you cross in the back. Now again, for graduate school and for several of you, origin and insertion is more to do with palpation of pain and those kind of things. But in terms of function, it doesn't matter. It matters where it crosses. Like I'm going to show you muscles that live their life on the outside, but then they cross over on the inside, and so they pull in the direction of pulling medial, even though the muscle lives its life lateral. So that's why it's so important for function in terms of crossing, just to see where and how it crosses the joints. Okay? The AP axis, this is, it's nice and pretty and straight. The gliding joint is not pretty and straight. It runs in between your big toe and your second toe, and it's kind of an average. Remember in 310, I said gliding joints technically don't have one true axis, but we can take an average. And that's kind of where the subtalar joint kind of averagely goes in between the first two toes. So what that means is that any muscles that cross medial to that is going to pull in the direction of inversion. And any muscles that cross lateral to that is going to pull in the direction of eversion. Now again, why do we combine these circles? Because you got muscles that function at both. So instead of doing two separate classes with the same students, we're just going to combine into one big class and understand that one muscle might function at the ankle and subtalar joint, several of them. Okay? Who remembers? You don't even have to answer it. I'm just hoping that I taught you something that you remember. Who remembers why apple, banana, strawberry, sledgehammer? You know, I like to say that all the time. Why does the ankle not have extension? Like we have flexion and extension all over the place. But why at the ankle why don't we have extension of the ankle? Is that? Well done, Jay. Two different ways to get in the fetal position, right? You can get into a ball with your feet on the ground, or you can get into a ball with your feet off the ground. And if your feet are off the ground, you're probably not going to get into a ball like this. Yeah? Two different forms of the same thing. Remember, flexion, as I taught you, was getting in the fetal and out of fetal. And so because the ankles can get into fetal in two different ways, with your feet off the ground, like when you watch gymnasts or divers, and they get in the fetal to spin, they're here. Or when you're in your bed and you wake up in a fetal position with your thumb in your mouth, you're not here, you're there. That's fetal position with your feet open. Okay, well done. So it makes sense we're going to have muscles that pull in both of those types of directions, dorsiflexors, plantar flexors. Inverters, everters. Right. Let's see. What page are we at? All right, right ankle and subtalar joint. So most of these muscles have combo functions. We're going to have, bless you, we're going to have some dorsiflexor inverters and some dorsiflexor everters and some plantar flexor inverters and some plantar flexor everters. And again, we have the same concept of cancellation, meaning that if I need all of my medial crossing muscles, well, how efficient that the dorsiflexor ones are going to cancel out the plantar flexor ones, they can just work together to pull medial. It's the same concept we've had a lot, where if you need a certain group, and those are agonistic helpers, then they can be antagonists to something that pulls in opposite direction in a certain plane. But if you need them in another plane, then all of a sudden they can be podnods. Right? So it's all based on who you need. Podnods, that's a scientific term, it should be. Okay, we have a couple weirdos here. Our soleus and gastroc, or they don't sit on the outside of class or the inside of class. They don't sit on the right or the left. They sit right in the middle, right? So these are going to be the two muscles that I'm going to teach you that only have one function at the ankle and subtalar joint. They're only going to have ankle function. They're not going to have subtalar function. Now I'm going to get into the whys and take out the ankle and show you how they're just right on the axis. And when you go to the front of the foot, the further you go out, the more opportunity you have to cross medial or lateral. But when you're in the back part, there's no real opportunity back there than just to go straight down and be on, you sit in the fence. Okay? Remember, these abbreviations mean nothing. They were my abbreviations. You can abbreviate it however you want. You can write the muscle out in your circles if that's how you do it too. In other words, on the test, I'm never going to be like, what's T-Day? I'm never going to do that. But it does help save a lot of space. All right, here we go. Let's talk about our first muscle. Obviously, check me, but I think I have these. All right. Y'all, some of these are just so easy. This is going to learn. So easy. And I say real easy because there's a lot of description in the muscles. It's like the first one, the tibialis anterior, a muscle in the front of the tibia. Right. So you see it there, tibialis anterior. Okay, God does not like the tibialis anterior. Right. Okay, I wish I wore my wind pants today because I have an analogy that I give. Tibialis anterior is that muscle when you dorsiflex and there's a little bump. Well, some are bigger than others, but just the front part of your shin kind of pops out. That's your tibialis anterior. Bless you, bless you, bless you. You're allergic to the tibialis anterior. Okay, it's been a fun day. Let me tell you what it does and why it's important. Okay, tibialis anterior. The first thing is it's anterior. It crosses in the front, so it's going to be a dorsiflexor. However, even though you see this muscle kind of start laterally, it crosses medially. So remember, our axis for our subtalar joint is here. Tibialis anterior crosses medial. So you can imagine if it pulled in the direction of inversion. Everybody see how that would work? Okay? Now, tibialis anterior, that's the muscle that when you walk, and you haven't walked in a long time, or maybe you're working with a client and they haven't walked for a long time, that's the one that you feel in the front. Whether you feel it fatigued, tired, I feel some. Now, That's not to get into what shin splints are. That's a catch-all term that can mean a lot of different things. Because there's a lot of structures that can be ticked off. Muscles can be ticked off, their tendons can be ticked off, their tendon sheets can be ticked off, the bone that it's pulling on can be ticked off. So shin splints could be a lot of different things. However, this muscle is pretty fascinating because in activities of daily living, we tend to recruit our plantar flexors a heck of a lot more than we do our dorsiflexors, meaning that our plantar flexors have to literally move us to get us to moving us around. The reason we need dorsiflexors to turn on every now and then to do a job is when we heel strike, when we're walking and running, and we heel strike, not only do we have the mass of our front foot wanting to plantar flex us, that's just a little bit. More than that is our ankle joint as a teeter-totter, the friction and ground reaction force from the ground wants to plantar flex us even faster. Does that make sense? So when we heel strike, not only do we have the center of the earth wanting to plantar flex us, but we have the ground wanting to plop our foot on the ground. Now, if you've been introduced to gait, if not, simple introduction, not going into too much crazy, but we need to transition. When we're swinging our foot and we're moving, it's called rolling friction. We have to eventually get our foot to not move or we slide off the ground. So basically what we do is we compress the heel to make sure we have enough friction to stop our foot momentum, and then we gradually transition to where we can get all of our surface area on the ground. And when we have all of our surface area there, that's when we can really grip the ground and use friction from the ground. So it's that transition between heel strike and what we call foot flight. It's no different than if you think about how a wheel is turning and it's constantly doing like this. I mean, it's a constant, but it's constantly heel striking to foot flatten, if you really want to think of it different. So what a muscle like the tibialis anterior does is, when you heel strike, that sucker turns on as a dorsiflexor, pulling in a direction of dorsiflexion. And through eccentric work, it controls the speed of the plantar flexion so that you don't go too fast. Because remember, you have to gradually transition to make sure that interlock happens and you don't slip away. So in activities of daily living, let's say someone hadn't been exercising and sedentary for years and years and years, their muscles like the tibialis anterior have learned to transition pretty easily. Or if they have small strides, you don't need as much transition if you have small strides. Well, what happens when you start exercising or walking? You take bigger strides, right? Bigger strides, more contact at the heel, more you need a muscle like the tibialis anterior to work eccentrically to transition from your heel strike to your foot flat. And that muscle is like, bro, I've never done this before in a long time. I don't like this at all. Your plantar flexors, I mean, think about it, guys. Big people, really good friend of mine, he's a big guy. His calves are huge. Big calves. Big people's plantar flexors are very fatigue resistant. But when you go from sedentary to a walking program, all of a sudden you start recruiting muscles that may not have been recruited at that level in years and years and years. My point is that it makes sense why someone's front shin would be feeling it after walking a mile or two. The back part's like, awesome, man, let's go. And the front part's like, dude, stop. So the tibialis anterior's job in walking, very important. Putting on that brake and allowing the plantar flexion at the speed you need to transition from heel strike to foot flat. Okay? Does it have help? Sure, it has help. But the tibialis anterior is a very important dorsiflexor for that reason. Okay? Let's talk about another important dorsiflexor. Another thing I want to talk about too before I get into it. Our shoes play a big role in our dorsiflexor's role of controlling transitional gait. What I mean by that is, if you have flip-flops, you ever notice how you don't stride as far with flip-flops because those things will fly off your foot? Another thing is when you have flip-flops, your toes can't push on anything. Your toes use the webbing of your foot to serve as a force pusher to help you as a dorsiflexor. When those toes can't push on stuff, you kind of make their contribution null and void. Your big toe, just like your thumb, has a muscle that goes right to it. Okay? Thumb is phalanx, toe is hallux, big toe is hallux. So you have this extensor hallucis or hallucis. Potato, does not matter to Miata. You have a big toe muscle that goes straight to that big toe. Now, our thumb, very important, but more important for the way it can reposition itself for gripping. Our big toe is a hoss. In fact, there's a reason they call it toe off when you leave the ground, because literally all the force transitions to the big toe, to that first grade. This is a hoss. So it makes sense if you have a lot of force that's being transmitted to that bone. One, that bone's going to be big, it's going to be thick, and it's going to have some special muscles that cross it to function in. So we literally have specialized muscles that go straight to the big toe. One of them pulls in the direction of extension, helps pull on your webbing of your foot, and the other pulls in the direction of flexion. This was called the extensor hallucis longus, long because of long tendon. Now, even though it pulls at the big toe, to get to the big toe, it crosses the ankle and the subtalar joint. So therefore, it functions at the ankle and subtalar joint. So don't, just because it's talking about pulling the big toe in a direction of extension, that's not disrespecting the big toe. That's just saying, well, to get there, you got to cross the ankle. And how do you cross the ankle to get there in the front? So it's impossible. I mean, if you think about it, if you took off your sock and your shoe and you attached a string to your big toe and you pulled like this, you pull them in the direction of dorsiflexion as well as big toe extension. Does that make sense? Okay. Extensor hallucis longus. Now, your brevis, the shorter one, right? Longus, long tendon, brevis, short tendon. This one doesn't cross the ankle joint. You see how it's more, we call that intrinsic, inside, not extrinsic coming from outside. Now, the extensor hallucis longus, it may be like, wait, dude, big toes. Well, again, here's the average axis for the subtalar and transverse tarsal joint. So it would cross on the inside of that. So that, I'm out of juice. Sorry, adapt, improvise, overcome. So your tibialis anterior, dorsiflexor inverted. Its partner in crime, extensor hallucis longus, extensor hallucis longus. Doesn't matter how you call it. Dorsiflexor inverted. Okay. The next ones we're going to look at are our dorsiflexor everters. First one is our digits, extensor digitorum. So again, you get into this muscle, fans out to the digits. Remember the example how I gave you that your hands have a lot more independent muscles than your feet for obvious reasons. The dexterity that you have in your hands is a little bit more than the dexterity of your feet. So for the feet, outside of your big toe, you really don't have to move your pinky by itself. You don't have to move your pointer by itself. You don't point with your big toe. If you do, that's a cool party trick. So again, you think about pushing on the webbing of your feet. Really, you just need one muscle that kind of, for the most part, just pulls on those other four. So I think the easy function to see is that it crosses anterior. The harder function to see is that it is lateral, not to the whole foot. It's lateral to that average AP axis that separates the inverters from the everters. It's lateral to in between the first and second toe.
dorsiflexor everter. Okay? Now it has a podknot. The peroneus tertius. Tertius, again, potato with a top. This is part of a family of perineals. Perineal family. And in the perineal family, you have sister muscles that are very much related to each other in every which way, the longus and the brevis. And then you have a cousin. You have a cousin who has a similar relative, but they don't have the exact same parents. And that's the tertius. So what do all of the perineal family have in common? They all cross laterally. They're all going to be everters. But the longus and brevis cross posterior. They're going to be plantar flexors. The tertius crosses anterior. It's going to be a dorsiflexor. So again, what's cool about showing you why the only thing that really matters to function is crossings. Now on the bottom you see this longus and brevis, and you see actually where they're hooking onto. This longus could literally wrap itself around the foot 5 times and it wouldn't change its function. It would have the exact same function because of the way it crosses. It could attach to the second bone, the third bone. It could wrap back around and attach to the heel. It doesn't matter. It's how does it cross. What I mean by that is if I have a string that crosses my elbow in the front, I could wrap that sucker around my arm. I could wrap it around my thumb. I could insert it on my thumb, my pinky. It doesn't matter. When I pull, it wants to make my elbow flex. Okay? Do y'all remember? This might be a good test question. Longus and brevis. Does that mean muscle length? No, it means tendon length. So longus muscles actually have short muscles, long tendons. Okay? For you athletic trainers, y'all probably knew this already, but maybe you guys didn't. It's kind of cool. When I was at Auburn, my fellowship was called the Kenny Howard Fellowship through the Houston Clinic, and we specialized in learning about adolescent injuries, because kids' injuries are different than our injuries. They don't have to be, but they can, because their bones aren't fused up. So you're looking a lot more at growth plate issues. You're looking at a lot more. When we roll a subtalar joint, we're looking at ligaments. For those kids, when they roll a subtalar joint, this rope may pull off a piece of this bone because this bone is weaker than or ligaments can pull off bones too. You can have avulsion from ligaments. So that's a common place where a youth can have a subtalar sprain, a low foot sprain, and pull off a chunk of that fifth metatarsal. They call that Jones, the Jones fracture. But for youth, there's different types of fractures. They have Salter-Harris scales for growth plate fractures, and those can get real freaky. But I'm planting that seed so that way maybe you have a younger brother, cousin, sister, and if they have a traditional injury, you may want to just say, hey, they're young, their bones haven't fully developed yet. Maybe just go get checked out just to make sure they don't have some growth plate issues. All right, so what's the function of the peroneus longus and brevis? Plantar flexor everters. So here is my bilateral axis, cross posterior. So again, you can see that it doesn't matter where it inserts. It doesn't matter that the longus inserts in the front. It doesn't matter. It's still going to pull in the direction of plantar flexion because of how it crosses. That's the important thing. So again, origin and insertion, extremely important when you get to a level where you need it to be important. Palpation, checking out origins, checking out insertions, making sure, does it hurt when I do this? Does it hurt to do that? For the purposes of this class, knowing that several of you are not only going to go in allied health, but personal training, fitness, coaching, do you think a coach needs to know where the insertion of the peroneus longus is? but you should probably know the function. What does it do? What do these muscles do? Okay? That's good. That's the right answer. All right. Let's go big days. All right, first off, plantaris, and why don't I include it? Plantaris, if just look at it, right? Like, that would be like looking at, who's the Greek feet freak? Giannis Antetokounmpo. The dude's a freak of nature. He's a biomechanical freak of nature. And if there's one thing I love, it's a biomechanical freak of nature. He's like 7 foot, could jump out the gym. You look at that dude, and then you look at me, right? And you'd be like, one of us looks like we were made to play basketball, and the other one looks like he's from Delco. The soleus would be like the Greek freak or LeBron James, and I'm the plantaris muscle, okay? So the plantaris, very feeble. 10% of you don't even have one. So you got all of these big players in terms of pulling the plantar flexion. Just the plantaris, just it's kind of one of those like appendix kind of things that like we used to need it back in the day, but we don't really need it as much now. So eventually it's just kind of wasting away. So I'm just saying why I don't have it in your circuit. It's just not a very big player. It's really sitting at the end of the bench where I would sit. Now what is cool is that you have some big time players. Like when you look at all of these muscles so far, you're like, oh, they're kind of small, stringy muscles. And then all of a sudden you're like, God, no, look at these powerhouses. And the reason you have to have these big powerhouses is because of leverage. These two muscles, the soleus and the gastroc, that's what blends into your big, strong Achilles. But when these guys are pulling on your calcaneus with this small little torque moment arm, and they need to jump up and dissipate force as you dorsiflex through eccentric work, that puts tremendous stress on that muscle, and it doesn't have much of a moment arm. You bet your butt it needs to compensate by being big and powerful. So these muscles look big because they need to be big, because they don't have the leverage advantage of some other muscles. Now the trade-off is that when they can overcome that disadvantage, they actually have an advantage, meaning that all they need to do is shorten a little bit and you get a full range of plantar flexion if you're trying to jump high or which is something I can't do. Now, the important thing for this class is for you guys to see that the gastrocnemius has 2 heads, a medial and a lateral. However, those heads don't have any significant differential function, meaning that they cross the knee posterior. We're going to get to them being knee flexors when we talk about the knee. They blend into one common tendon along with the soleus. So you got the medial gastroc, lateral gastroc, soleus, 3 heads. Athletic trainers have heard it called the triceps surae. The important thing, though, is that this rope that it's pulling on crosses the ankle joint posteriorly and in anatomical position posteriorly only. Does it have some midway effect? Yeah, like if you roll it on the inside, you can kind of make the gastroc cross more on the inside. Remember, all of these are based off of anatomical, and I've always been upfront about what I'm holding you accountable for. Okay? So in anatomical position, it's not medial nor lateral. It sits the fence. So it's only going to pull posterior. Now let's talk about length tension, which I think is one of the coolest concepts I'm going to teach you in class. I'm only bringing it up now because this is the most obvious example that you guys have some familiarity with. But this can be applied to any biarticular muscles in the body. Let's pretend I used to have one up here. Maybe it got confiscated. Totally understandable. All right, guys, let's use our imaginations. Let's pretend I have a TheraBand, which is just a big rubber band, right? You could even think of it as a rubber band, it doesn't matter. The rubber band is inert, meaning that it doesn't have contractile properties, meaning that I could zap it with electricity and it's going to look at me like a cat, like, bro, whatever. I don't respond to that. Rubber on your tires doesn't respond to electricity. TheraBands only respond to length change. Longer is stronger, right? The more you stretch it, the more it wants to return to its original shape. True? Okay. Your muscles have rubber band-like properties. I introduced you to that in 310, series and parallel elastic components. The inert, stretchy rubber band-like properties. Okay. For muscles, longer is stronger, not from the contractile components, because you guys learned probably in exercise phys that the sarcomeres, as you lengthen them, they pull away from each other, they don't pull as much. And then when you shorten them above, they overlap. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about the stretchy materials of muscles. Longer is stronger, just like with rubber bands. So here's what happens in an example like the gastrocnemius, a biarticular muscle, a muscle that crosses the knee in the back and the ankle in the back. What happens is that if you're standing and your knee is extended and your ankle is in anatomical, if you flex your knee, you shorten the rubber band properties of that muscle. Well, if I shorten the top end, guess what's not pulling as much on the bottom end? I mean, you could do this thought experiment and just truly understand that if I have a TheraBand and I shorten it on one end, it's not pulling as much on the other. So basically what happens is you could potentially put a biarticular muscle on slack. And when a muscle is on slack, it doesn't pull as much on the other end. It's not that the muscle doesn't pull at all. It's just not pulling as much as if I would have had it lifted because of the elastic properties. So this is what kind of happens when you do seated toe raises. You put the gastrocnemius on slack because it's a knee flexor, crosses the knee in the back. Your soleus is like, my length doesn't change at all. You can do whatever you want to your knee. My length isn't compromised. So when you flex your knees and you put your gastroc on slack, something takes up the slack. Imagine playing tug of war with a friend, and you're playing against some kids, right? So you couldn't win if you wanted to. When you work out, typically you wouldn't work out with weights you couldn't move. You see what I'm trying to say? Typically, when you work out, it's something you can beat. So imagine playing tug of war with kids, and all of a sudden, y'all are both pulling at a certain amount to tie with the kids you're playing with. You're like, and all of a sudden you got a scratch, and you take one hand off. Well, if you don't want to start losing, your friend better start pulling with a little bit more force to take up that slack. Now, it's not happening exactly like that, but here, if I am doing a certain amount of weight on my plantar flexors, and everybody's kind of has a contribution, when I put those gastrocs on slack, other muscles need to do a little more for the same amount of work. Something's got to take up that slack. So that's where you get seated calf raises work the soleus. It's not that it just works the soleus, it's that the soleus got to work a little more to compensate for the slacked gastrocnemius. But it's not just the soleus, the other plantar flexors are working too. It's just this is one of the big horses that pulls on your calcaneus, so it gets a lot of love. Okay? Here's another example. I know we haven't gotten there yet, but I'm trying to give you examples that you could familiarize yourself with. Yeah, like, oh yeah, I can see that. You have a muscle in the body called the rectus femoris. It's a hip flexor, crosses in the front. It's a hip flexor, but it's a knee extensor. Imagine if you were doing, you were just doing for reps to exhaustion, leg extensor exercises, right? I know they call them leg extensions, but I don't like to say that word. Imagine you're like on rep, 50 or 60. You're just going to fatigue, and you're just like, and you're struggling to get that last rep, and you're like, I gotta get this last rep. instinct-wise, you darn know you would lean back to try to get a little bit of extra. You know it. Your body knows the physics. But let's talk about why. This muscle, that's a hip flexor knee extensor, when you lean back, you lengthen it. Basically, this is what's happening. If you lengthen it up here, it's going to pull more down there. That's what the lesson is today. Length-tension relationships of biarticular muscles. Now, as therapists, this is some cool information to have. Because in 310 we said, hey, this group and this group and this group, and in 415 we're like these muscles, this. But you could go down the rabbit hole a little bit further. You could say, yeah, I need to work some plantar flexors, but you know what? I need to specifically emphasize that soleus a little bit more. Or it could be your peroneus longus and brevis a little bit. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to handicap the gastroc. I'm going to say, look, gastroc, you're solid, dude. You're the man. I know you can. But we need you to kind of let some other people do a little bit of the work today. So how do you lessen it? You put it on slack. You put it on slack so that others can take up that slack. And y'all, that's all over the body. Biarticular muscles. Now, why do we have biarticular muscles? That's a great question. That's a great question. In other words, all over the body, why is it that a muscle like the gastroc, when I'm doing a functional task like a squat, I'm shortening at the knee, but I'm lengthening at the ankle. And then I'm shortening at the ankle, I'm lengthening at the knee. For my rectus, when I'm doing a squat, I'm shortening at the hip, but I'm lengthening at the knee. You have that all over the place. And the answer is beautiful. It's beautifully brilliant. It goes back to the sarcomeres. Remember in exercise fitness, y'all learned about the little cilia, right? And how overlap is bad and pull apart. What's optimal? You got rest and lift, man. You got optimal interaction. So imagine having a muscle that crosses two joints, and as we shorten on one end, at the same time we lengthen at the other end. So basically it allows us to do this and keep the active components more in resting limb. It's beautifully brilliant. Now, that's the physiological reason. There's some mechanical reasons as well. In that not everything you've been taught, it's not that it's wrong, it's just that we can look at it in different ways. And that's what we're going to do on Wednesday. I'm going to show you that these hamstrings that we typically just look at hip or knee movers, if I'm doing a squat, these muscles are literally pulling on my shin this way. And guess what? If they're pulling and influencing my shin, guess what also must be influenced? My knee. Because my knee is attached to it. My knee's connected to it. So there's some mechanical reasons why we have biarticular muscles as well. Because in closed chain settings, technically the knee doesn't exist. I'm going to get into that on Wednesday. But it's all beautiful, it's all cool, and hopefully it's stuff you're going to dig, okay? All right, y'all, have a good day.